We all kind of intrinsically know that these foods are not good for us, but yet it's available.
Meet Jieun, a Korean American who grew up in the US, lived in Dubai and Hong Kong, and now resides in Singapore. She made a career switch from finance to journalism and then to functional nutrition. Jieun told me why she chose Singapore over other places, what dietary issues you may face as an expat, and whether meals in Singapore's food courts are unhealthy. I'm Chernov, let's go! If you compare this life in LA, Hong Kong, Dubai, and Singapore, what's your favorite? And okay, let's start with what's your favorite?
Okay, super hard question. I think for me, LA was great because is that growing up in that American culture where you can do anything, kind of question, that sort of American, that optimism, right? But I also appreciate the fact that I'm Korean, so I was quite grounded in a lot of the Korean principles of family and those, work ethic, those value systems. Hong Kong was wild at that time. That was, I think, I was there in sort of 2006, 2007, before the financial crisis. So those were always,
golden years.
Golden years, right? And Hong Kong at that time was, to me, like New York, but better because it had that Asian overlay. And then Dubai was a time where that's when I changed careers. I had a young family. And Dubai's motto is very much that anything's possible or nothing's impossible. And I actually really felt that when I lived there. I felt I could do anything. I felt I could change careers. I felt I could have a family. So I felt I could question the system. And then with Singapore, my kids are a little bit older, and now the way that the world is so polarized in many ways, and the news coming out of the US is always about gun crimes and violence. I have to appreciate Singapore for the safety and the boundaries. Even in my own work, I talk to patients about the importance of freedom and boundaries. You can have freedom in terms of whatever you want to eat and no boundaries, but guess what? That boundary will ultimately be your health, and that. So, but then equally, you have some boundaries in what you eat. Then the freedom is the freedom for your body and your health. So I think of Singapore a little bit in that sort of context of there's that fine line between the freedom and boundaries, which is working really well.
Dubai seems a little bit like Singapore in the 70s. So they're trying to get ideas from all over the world. They try to get in the best people from all over the world. And they're quite successful with this strategy, I think. It's there are pros and cons, but it works. The strategy, I think, works for them.
I think you know what it is. It's information is key, right? The more information you have, the better data set, and you can make better decisions. So, to pull it back to my role in nutrition, it's the same thing. I have people who come in and they want to consult with me, and they have no diagnostics, and I tell them, look, I can't. It's hard for me to work with you by just looking at you. But if I have diagnostics and I have data on you, then I can make a better decision with you, to help your health problems. So I think governments are the same. Or even when you're in finance, the more information you have about how the market's moving, same thing. I think Dubai is a beautiful place because it's that Middle East idea is that they're pulling ideas and thoughts and world leaders from the East, the West, and they kind of they have this access, and then they look at what's best and what applies for them, and then they can make really great decisions in that way.
When you moved to Hong Kong, was it for you you appreciated Asia because you have Asian roots, or it didn't really matter for you?
I think it doesn't really matter for Hong Kong at the time. I think it was so open and welcoming to the world. So it was really it was more industry led, because Hong Kong was very finance, legal, that sort of industry. For me, I still love Hong Kong now. It's changed, it's changing, but that's what happens. But I think for me, the draw was more the energy, the dynamic international kind of influences.
This was the golden era for Hong Kong. What's the craziest memory from your time in Hong Kong?
I have to say there's a lot of memories, but I think the beauty of Hong Kong is that it was very dynamic, a lot of industries, but also just the physical the way Hong Kong is. You have mountains, you have a beach, you have, you can be hiking one morning and you could be on the beach in the afternoon, and you can be in Macau. It's just the way the actual construct is pretty unique.
For you think at some point you go back to the US or to Korea or somewhere else?
This is the hard part, right? Once you've lived abroad as an expat, it's kind of hard to decide where will be home. I mean, in an ideal world, I'd love to spend 6 months somewhere, 6 months somewhere else, but I think it's hard to say.
Yeah, same for me actually. Like my ideal life is like maybe 3 months or 4 months, like 3 different locations around the world.
Yes,
like
exactly.
maybe one in Europe, one in Singapore,
Yeah.
one somewhere else, and then you can.
Exactly.
But the kids need to be grown up, so the kids need to go to uni.
I think where the kids go will somewhat decide, you know. So because I think, you know, the Western idea where your kids go off and they live by themselves and they have this whole separate life, I mean, I accept it. I mean, I've done that, but at the same time, I think the Asian side is very much like, well, the whole idea is that you are together as a family, and I don't know if nowadays the generation is changing, but sort of intergenerational living, I think it's amazing and I think it's great, and I don't think we do enough of that. So I hope that I'd be invited by my kids to be part of that intergenerational living.
You switched your career like 2 times.
So I've kind of had a couple of career changes, which I think nowadays, especially for women, when they have different life transitions, life circumstances, that's kind of normal. Maybe the generation before might have been you do one job, one corporate job for quite a long time, but I think now people change as to their life circumstance.
But you changed twice.
Yeah.
First you changed to the journalist.
Yes, I was in
CNN.
finance, then I worked in journalism, and then from journalism I then switched into nutrition.
It's like 2 quite big switches, I would say. Yeah. It's like completely different area.
Totally different.
What was the motivation? Were you scared to switch, like first time and second time?
Not my first time, because I didn't have kids then. And then I switched into nutrition because of my kids. And so it was almost like I didn't have a choice. So just to backtrack my story a little bit, when my daughter was about 1.5, she basically had an ear infection, and it was like a lot of mucus and a lot of blockages. I took her to specialists, and I went to about 4. And these specialists all told me antibiotics, surgery, minor organ removal, all of. So to me, I thought, this is a 1.5-year-old. She's not at school yet.
Yeah.
And I asked them, where is this infection coming from? Why? And why it's one-sided. So from that experience, I realized that I was only going to get the symptomatic treatment. You have an infection, this is how we can treat you, but they can't tell you where or why or how it started. Luckily, I found a practitioner who I worked with, and we sort of uncovered that it was related to food sensitivities, her reaction to certain foods. So from then, I deep dive, fell down a rabbit hole, and decided I wanted to go into nutrition. I think for me, I've always enjoyed working where I'm learning, and I feel that in switching to nutrition, I had to do all the pre-med courses and that syllabus. But I was driven by the need to find an answer for my child, really. So I think that was the internal motivation that really was the driver. I was a little bit, I guess what you say, jaded or disillusioned by the medical system, and I thought they just want to short-term treat her, but they don't want to figure out why. What's the root cause?
Yeah.
So for me, I thought, I've got to find that answer myself. No one's going to do it for me.
Did you get enough sleep last night? If not, let's change that in 1 minute. We all know how crucial good sleep is for your health and happiness, yet it can be elusive. That's why I want to recommend you Manta Sleep, the sponsor of today's video. This is my Manta Sleep Mask. If you ever used an ordinary sleep mask, you might think that sleeping with the mask sucks. They slip off, let in light, or press against your eyelashes. But this mask is a game changer. It's designed with adjustable eye cups. This means you can customize it to fit your face perfectly, ensuring total darkness and zero pressure on your eyes. It's like it was made just for you. So whether I'm taking a quick nap during the day or trying to sleep on a flight, the Manta Sleep Mask blocks out all the light. It's so comfortable that I barely feel it on my face. It's the best first step to ensure you sleep better anywhere, anytime. Trust me. Start improving your sleep now and your future self will thank you. So follow the link in description below and use my promo code maxchernovYT for 10% off your order. Sleep well.
There is a huge culture of food courts in Singapore.
Yeah.
Like hawker centers is basically it's the base of the local culture. For you as a professional nutritionist, how would you rate the healthiness of the food in hawker centers?
Look, I think hawker centers, it's very cultural. I think there's a lot of improvements that could be made. I'm not going to pick one or the other, but I think the general health, when it gets to the oil quality and the fried foods, this is where there's a big problem. I think we all know that frying is bad, right? But the reason is because the type of oil that's being used is very refined.
Yeah.
For example, palm oil. Palm oil, naturally, palm is a very red, spicy, kind of hot fruit.
Yeah.
That turns into an oil. But you can take palm oil and make it and put it into an Oreo, right? But that Oreo is not hot, spicy, and red. So that palm oil has gone through so many conversions.
Yeah.
It's degummed, it's de-waxed, it's bleached, it's refined, it's heat treated. So we're using palm oil or vegetable oil or canola or ground nut. It's all of these super refined oils that actually that's really unhealthy because it creates more oxidative stress in our bodies.
Yeah.
So it's not that hawker food is bad because it's a hawker center.
Yeah.
I think it's because of the quality of ingredients.
What would be, let's say, the healthiest choice in hawker centers? What kind of cuisine?
I'd say either fresh or steamed.
Oh, maybe soup?
Soup could be, or yes, exactly. So again, it comes down to what is that soup made of.
Yeah.
Same with the steaming, right? But process-wise, I would say something fresh, something soupy, or something steamed. But again, it's what are you steaming? What are you cooking into soup?
Yeah. I'm curious how to find the balance. Like, I love hawker food, but I also try to stay healthy.
Yeah.
How to enjoy life and sometimes maybe occasionally go to hawker centers.
Yeah.
But still try to be healthy.
Yeah.
What would be your advice?
So,
how to approach it?
So my advice in general is it depends on where you're starting from. If you're someone who, let's say, already has high cholesterol, or you have hypertension, or you have diabetes, or some chronic disease, I think you have to be careful about what you eat a lot more than someone who has no chronic disease.
Yeah.
But my general guideline is that 90-10 ratio, people always love ratios, and I've heard 80-20, and for me, I'm like 80-20 is a B minus. Right? If you're an Asian, you're like, a B minus is not acceptable.
Okay.
So 90-10 is an A minus, at least, try to be above. But 90% of the time, I actually think people should be cooking at home, if possible, right? Or you're choosing your vegetable, fresh foods, 90% of your plate. That 10% you kind of save for, or less, hopefully less than 10%, for those times where you're going out or you're making a choice that might not be as healthy. But the hard part is that, produce here in Singapore is quite expensive. Hawker centers somehow are able to make that. So it's a budgetary reason, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think Singapore government could, more subsidies for local farmers, fresh ingredients. Maybe that would help change the economics. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But I think you've got to be mindful for sure. And I almost kind of think that having that 90-10 as a quota is also helpful. So if I'm 90% of the time, I'm focused and I'm conscious about the food choices I'm making.
Yeah.
Maybe 5 to 10% of the time, you can be less conscious, right? So,
Yeah.
but again, everyone is individual, and I say like your unique fingerprint. If I'm sitting across from you and we're discussing your health, I've got to know where you're starting from. Like, what are your diagnostics? You know, do you have cardiovascular risks? Do you have, you know, kidney risks? Do you have diabetic risk? You know, we want to see where are we starting from, and then kind of maneuver.
What are the most, like, under the radar unhealthy habits that people do and they don't really realize that they're doing it?
Ultra processed foods, UPFs, or they're almost, UPFs are like UFOs. It's an alien product, completely alien. And these foods are marketed to us, to our children, breakfast cereals, right? So colorful, so enticing, addictive. I mean, like, you can eat one bowl of cereal and then be hungry for the next, and next thing you know, you've had 5, or your child, right? So these ultra processed foods, eliminate them. It's hard to, because they're so pervasive in our environment. But I would say that is the biggest way to shift your health, is away from those ultra processed foods and move towards real foods. And if you want to talk about the science on why it's not only the artificial colorings and artificial sugars and sweeteners. I mean, they wreck your brain. The amount of, I think it's like 100, you know, artificial sweeteners are like 100 times sweeter than normal sugar. And the processing in our brains and the mechanism it goes through, from aspartame goes to formaldehyde, formaldehyde goes to formic acid. These pathways, I mean, formaldehyde, you know what formaldehyde is, right? It's that crazy weird, like, you know, when you go to science museums and there's like a brain preserved or like a hand that's preserved, like that's a toxic liquid, formaldehyde, right? So formaldehyde, in order to be safely processed in our body, we actually don't have a biochemical pathway to do that. But we have to convert it away from this toxic substance. And it uses so many B vitamins or C vitamins. I mean, so it's almost like it's a drainer of all the good things that we're trying to, you know, to do for ourselves, you know, in eating nutritiously. It almost sucks up all those micronutrients. So those artificial sugars, the ultra processed foods, again, to go back to the chemistry of it, it's called advanced glycation end products, AGEs, which I think is kind of, it's aptly named. If you have a lot of foods with AGEs, you will AGE a lot faster, right? You will, the ages will age you. And AGEs are a product of sort of heat-treated foods. You know, when you bake bread and you smell it, that's gone through a heat treatment. Or when you have a steak or something and you grill it, that burning, that flavor, aroma, those are actually AGE products. So you kind of want to balance, am I eating a lot of AGE products? Or, you know, and that your immune system then has to manage that. So when it gets to a point where you have quite a lot of advanced glycation end products in your immune system, it's off balance. So there's a lot of chemistry that is super fascinating, but these ultra processed foods, it's just like this chemical toxic, right? You know, creation that food scientists are paid a lot of money for. I'm not the only person saying this, right? I think we all kind of intrinsically know that these foods are not good for us, but yet it's available. If you go to a supermarket, some supermarkets, the fresh section is very small. The rest of it is shelf life products. So, yeah.
Feels like 99% of people, like, they don't have healthy habits, they eat wrong foods.
It's actually not the individual's fault. It's actually the system.
This is the system.
It's our food system in the way that, I mean, like how, I don't know, like lobbyists or economics and all of that plays a role. So, you know, I think if we were having this conversation and we were in another city, it would be maybe different about the food choices. But, you know, in Singapore, we are lucky in that we have the access to fresh as an option, right? So as much as I say hawker center foods aren't great for you, you can still find some fresh options, right? And at least it's been cooked and it's prepared on a daily basis. Not every country gets that.
I mean, in the US, I think it's a big problem overall, like how people eat. I used to live there. I remember, like, I was a student there my first time in the US. I was fascinated with the endless refill you have your Coke,
Oh, yes.
and then it's a huge cap, and then you can, I didn't have any money, so you just go to the refill endlessly.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, how much sugar I consumed back then.
Exactly. And that time it was all about, it's fine because it's calories in and it's calories out, right? That's all that people were worried about. So you could Diet Coke, refill,
Yeah.
abundance.
Yeah.
And I think now, especially with the functional perspective, we're realizing that calories in, calories out model is not working, and it's not working for anybody. Yes, exercise, super important, all of that. But now we're shifting toward this idea where actually quality really matters. What kind of calories are we getting, you know? So, because again, calories, I have this liter here, right? And I could say, hey Max, I've got a liter of fluid. It's 100 calories. You could say, okay, great. I could have water in here, I could have juice in here, I could have wine, I could have bleach for all you know, right? But would you want to drink that bleach? No, you wouldn't. So I think calories is a unit of measure. We have to respect it, and it's part of that framework, but we have to know what's in the calories, right? But in the US, I think there is a really big problem. And I grew up in Los Angeles, and Los Angeles is slightly more, health skewed.
In California, it's a bit better.
A little bit better,
there
but
are healthy
still,
options.
with kids, you still, at lunchtime, kids still want Oreos, and they still want other cookies. And I don't know if you ever saw these things called Lunchables. They were like these little squares and a little processed ham and a processed cheese. That was so popular. And I remember I would ask my parents, can I please have a Lunchable? And my parents were looking at me thinking, what is this, right? The Korean side of them was saying, this isn't
eat
food.
kimchi.
Yeah. I can pack you rice and seaweed and kimchi, which now I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so much healthier.
Right.
But at that time, when you were younger, you wanted to fit in and have that American culture. So, the amount of processed food that is it's like we're preparing for some like endless war that we're just going to have shelf life stable
Maybe
food.
we are.
I mean, I hope not, but yes.
Hopefully not.
Yeah. As an expat, and you're an expat, and people watching this might be expat, but the idea that when people move, you have dietary acculturation. A lot of people, when you enter a host country, you try to adopt the cultural norms and the values, and a lot of that is food. And it kind of shows how complex food is, because food is memories, it's taste, it's comfort, it's it's much more than just what's on your plate. But if you look at how people move and they acclimatize to their different regions, how that also impacts food choices, their health. So there are a lot of studies when they look at, Japanese immigrants to the US or Korean immigrants to the US or a lot of immigrants to the US, and they try to adopt this sort of cultural kind of American Western diet, how the rates of chronic diseases increase. I think there's also, not because that they all adopt the Western diet, but it's the idea that when you're out of your own normal host, your own culture, that's very clearly defined, and you get separated and you're moved to a new culture, all of a sudden you're learning new things. There's variables involved. So the idea is that a lot of times people choose their festive foods, that they would have had once or twice a year, and all of a sudden these festive foods become very important to their comfort. So then they start having it every weekends, or then, a couple of times a week. The Korean example is Korean barbecue. Korean barbecue is not a daily normal food, that you would have Koreans at home. But Koreans, when they moved to the US, it became this kind of, you wanted that cultural connection and you wanted to celebrate with the people around you. And now Korean barbecue is everywhere, right? So I think that idea that dietary acculturation is also really important to think about.
Let me tell you my experience, like dealing with the nutritionist, with the coach. So basically I hired one like last year for a month. So it's a program. Basically how it works, I have my breakfast and I take a photo and I send it to her, like WhatsApp it to her.
Okay.
And she give me some like comments. So basically it's for every meal. And I did it for like 30 days, for a month. I was like pretty cool. So I lost some weight. I definitely start like eating more healthy. And how it works actually, that's what we discussed. If you don't pay for it, so for advice, it doesn't.
Yep.
It kind of doesn't work. And for me, it was like, okay, in the evening, I just went to play football, and then I want to have a can of beer. But then, if I have this beer, then I have two choices. Either I need to send it to her, and then what's the point? I send a photo of beer to her, and she's like, yeah. Or I need to hide it.
Okay.
But if I hide it, like, what's the point of paying to the consultant?
Yeah, exactly.
So I end up not having the beer. So
Okay.
that's how it works.
Yeah.
But
You're being more conscious.
yeah, being more conscious, exactly. Yeah, and thinking. You start from thinking what you eat. I think that's the first step. But then the problem was, like, after 30 days, I think I haven't built the habits properly. So maybe I tried to have this diet for maybe another month, but then it kind of fade away.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and that's the problem. So
Yeah.
what would be your advice?
I hear that all the time. I think the problem is it's great that you had someone who you were accountable for and you were working together with.
Yeah.
I think where my approach is slightly different, especially with the functional lens, is that I want you to make choices not because I'm going to say yes or no, that you actually understand why you're making these decisions.
Yeah.
So a lot of the time when I do consults with patients, it's actually spent a lot on education, you know, and there's a lot of nutrition myths and the noise out there from online media to kind of go through and swim through and figure out what is actually textbook, what is scientific, what is evidence-based.
What's the biggest ones? The myth?
Oh, the biggest myth, protein.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Oh, right. It's
Okay.
and I'm unpopular for saying this. Maybe this is what will go viral. But
yeah.
I'm like, we are all focused so much on protein, and it's protein, and we're gonna avoid sarcopenia when we get older. And I'm thinking we need to focus on fiber. We have this gut microbiome, and we're starting to talk about that. But this gut microbiome, it's the question of, are we the host or are they the host? And we have the symbiotic relationship. But we have zillions of gut microbiome. And they are integral to our neuro health, our biological health, every system in our body is touched by our gut.
Yeah.
And we don't feed our gut enough. We need to focus on fiber.
So kimchi. It's good.
Fermented, the cabbage.
The
cabbage
yeah.
is why it's good. The
Okay,
cruciferous
okay.
vegetables, right?
Yeah.
I think there's so many myths. But protein is sexy. You can sell protein, protein bars, you have all this. But fiber isn't sexy, but it's fundamental. So these are kind of where we have to go back to.
What contains fiber?
So
Cabbage?
cabbage, kale, spinach, all the green vegetables, fruit. So there's two types of fibers, the soluble fiber and the insoluble fiber.
Yeah.
Soluble meaning it can dissolve in water. So the soluble fiber actually has a lot of the nutrients, the vitamins, there's metabolites that do magic in our body. And then the insoluble fiber is that kind of like roughage, the stuff that helps clear it out. So these two types of fiber are found in all plants, all veg. They're not found in animal products. So not that I'm saying you have to be vegan or anything, I'm just saying when you're consciously eating, you're aware that I need to get at least 30 to 50 grams of fiber. Most people, studies are showing around like 15 grams. So, I mean, the number of times I have people come in and tell me they're constipated, or they go from constipation to diarrhea to gas to bloating, all these gut issues. And then you look at their diet and you can see very clearly they're undernourished with fiber.
Yeah. Okay, so lots of vegetables with every meal.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds basic, but that's kind of one of the fundamentals. And a lot of people are getting kind of confused by, hey, let's start the morning with a protein shake or a protein this, right? And we're missing a lot of the fundamentals, that fiber.
About building the habits, what would be your advice? How to do it?
There's that famous book, Atomic Habits. I forgot the author, but he always says start small. I think that's a really, really good piece of advice. So start small, because I think when people see like there's too much to change, they feel overwhelmed and then they give up. So I normally try to start with one or two things we try to implement, and we make it easy. And then once we hit those, then we move on to the next couple of habits to change. But I also think it's working on mindset a lot. I have patients who come in and we'll go through everything, and I'll sit across from them and I'll know you're not ready to change. So I ask them, at what point of pain do you have to get to change? Because people change really well when they are like either in some sort of chronic issue, or their blood markers came back and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have a heart attack soon, right? That's when they're at their point of pain. And people are then ready to change that mindset. But if you're sort of someone who's like, I don't have symptoms, but a little bit of this, and I'm kind of okay, and I'm kind of managing, a lot of times that mindset's not ready. So I think that's actually the biggest part of building the habits. So you can have little small tricks that you incorporate, but it's fundamentally that mindset shift, that perspective change.
So first you have to get to the stage when you're almost dying. Then it's easier to change.
Yeah, not necessarily dying, but like I've had people where they're like, I can't go to the bathroom without a laxative. I haven't been, that's been 2 years. And now they're like, 2 years have gone by, right?
Yeah.
Or people who are saying, every time I eat, I'm bloated. Or every time I eat, I have to run to the bathroom. And they're just, at some point, they're like, this is not, the quality of my life has gone down.
Yeah.
So it's kind of weighing that quality of life question. Or some people say, look, I've just gone through this trauma and I've realized, I want to be there for my children. And then all of a sudden the children are that mindset driver. So I think people's goals and people's perspectives have to be aligned, right? Some people say, okay, I really want to eat this cake, but I'm diabetic. But then they're like, okay, well, I want to be alive in 10 years for my child to graduate from university or to get married. All of a sudden, these things become drivers. But that's very personal.
Yeah. So for you, you try to understand what drives like these habits, like psychologically, mentally.
Yeah.
And then you kind of go to the physical steps.
I think the idea of the functional perspective is really, it's kind of a new way of thinking about health. It's focusing very much on what makes us healthy, number one. Number two, it's let's take a root cause. What's the problem really? You have a rash. Sometimes doctors will say, here's a steroid cream, or here's an antihistamine. My job is sort of, why do we have the rash in the first place before treatment? So you can combine the treatment, but it's really questioning, where is this coming from, why? And then the functional, so you take that lens and you realize that we have to look at the whole body systems, not just at like in a myopic sort of goggles view of this is the liver or this is the kidney or this is the brain. We have to look at the body systems. It's neurological, it's immune system, it's nervous system, it's skeletal, muscular, digestive. It's all these systems overlaid on each other. And then it's kind of like a kaleidoscope. You like turn the kaleidoscope and then you see straight through. That's what we're trying to do kind of with that functional perspective. So we have to talk about family dynamics, we have to talk about environment, we have to talk about personal history, so all of that falls into that mindset. And then yes, the diagnostics we build onto that.
Should a nutritionist be like pushy a bit, like a gym coach? It's like be at the same time good and bad policeman, like motivating you, but then kind of a bit like pushing you to your like.
Yeah, I guess so. I think I like to think that I'm there to motivate people to be conscious about what they're doing and what they're changing. But I will definitely be real with them if I think they've made some bad decisions, and it's repeated and we're not making progress. Part of my job is to say, hey, like we're here to make change. So sometimes people need a little bit of a break, or they need some setbacks, like mistakes or growth, right? It's not that you've made one mistake and it's over. People sometimes have to go through that, and I realize that, but at the same time, where I think my expertise comes in well is that most of the people I work with, I can communicate in a way where they're getting it, using their diagnostics, understanding their backgrounds, and understanding the environment they're in. So I think that sort of communication strategy is also really important. Yeah.
What I see works for like my clients. I used to have these mastermind groups. It's more like for social media business. So I used to help people like to grow their social media presence and do sales through it. generate leads. And what actually helped, I noticed that when people are going like the wrong direction, you kind of get them back to their like goal,
Yes.
what they set in the beginning.
Yeah,
it's like, why are you doing it?
Yes.
Why
exactly.
you go in the wrong direction? You remember we like our initial goal was like you want to make like $1 million or something, and then exactly. And then they have to like always remember why they're doing it, the big why,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. I think branding, marketing, you're right. Yeah, there is a psychological element to it and the implementation side. So yeah, exactly. It's always about the why.
Yeah. Are there like any quick fixes that you can recommend? Maybe something that you can implement easily in your life and then it improves the quality of like how you eat.
Yeah. Actually, changing is not some big hard thing that you have to do. I have some people who see me once, twice, they get it, they change. And it's not me changing them, it's them changing their mindset, their sort of perspectives, and their body then also changes with that. But I'd say some of the quickest fixes, and it sounds kind of gimmicky, but focusing on fiber.
Okay.
Easy sources of fiber, chia seeds. I mean, you can
chia
buy,
seeds,
they're
okay.
accessible, right? Seeds are very powerful because if you think about that little seed, it has to grow into this plant or grow into this tree. There's a lot of nutrients stored in there, and there's fiber. So the seeds, they become a bit jellyish, like when you put them in water or some sort of a liquid. That soluble fiber and insoluble fiber are there. So like, I'd say hands down with everyone, I'd say easy way to get your fiber, a couple of tablespoons of chia seeds, right? That's the easiest kind of
one.
gimmicky social media online kind of one-liner. Have your chia seeds. And I'm not like sponsored by a chia seed company or anything.
What's the meaning of life for you?
Appreciating what we have. We've all been given, this opportunity in life. We have this body that is so complex, so meaningful, and I guess just appreciating certain fundamentals and then using that to, I guess, improve other people's lives.
After our conversation, I'm so inspired to improve my nutrition and my food habits. And I have two goals. One is to lose about 5 kilo of weight, and another one is to lower down my cholesterol. And so I decided to work with Jieun for 6 months to do it, to achieve these goals. And I'll be posting the updates on the YouTube community page on this channel, so you check it out. And if you also want to improve your nutrition, just join me in this journey, set up your goals, and let's do it together.